Something you don't see often in the NFL, an offensive line together for an entire season, John, and healthy, and a big reason why the Bills had some of the success they have. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast.
And I'm Jon Scott, and what a difference a year makes. Heading into the offseason a year ago, offensive line was a pretty large talking point because that group dealt with injuries. They dealt with just not playing well, and ultimately Brandon Beane uses free agency and the draft to address the interior. And Connor McGovern was a good signing for the Buffalo Bills, and O'Cyrus Torrence was incredible in terms of the return on investment right out the gate. Torrence, a guy that during the pre-draft process was at times mocked to the Bills in the first round, oftentimes looked at as a first-round talent, ultimately falls to the back end of the second. The Bills get him. We praised the move and draft selection at that point in time, but even then, I don't think anybody anticipated him starting right away, maybe, but literally playing every single snap the entire season, and there were very few moments that you would sit there and watch and say, oh boy, that's a rookie moment right there. As all of his teammates said, coaching staff, boy, you set it and forget it like he was a 5-8 year veteran.
It's weird when you look at Dalton Kincaid, of course, the first-round draft pick, that for someone especially like me, you notice an offensive lineman pretty much as the rookie that really stood out as the success Dalton Kincaid had. Okay, that's fine, but O'Cyrus Torrence to me was the guy that popped out of, man, they really hit the nail on the head getting this guy. They got him in the second round. I remember talk that he was NFL ready at this point, but still a rookie. He still questioned it. I remember going into training camp. I think we were both in agreement that it would take some doing on his part to be the day one starter. And there you have it. He did it, and it was no letdown. Like you said, there was no point in the season where you were like, well, we're questioning the offensive line on why they can't do anything, and you got this rookie in there. Should he come out for a veteran for a while to help Josh Allen out? It just wasn't the case the entire season.
And Connor McGovern was someone, there were other guards on the free agent market that maybe I had my eye on, maybe other people did, and they give Connor McGovern a sizable, decent contract. And you're thinking, well, it's not like Dallas's offensive line is as stout as it once was. Why are they letting this guy go? Why are the Bills ponying up this type of cash to sign him? And he was good too. Very few moments, but every offensive lineman has moments where you're like, oh, you got. And that's just what happens. And the continuity as a whole. And Deion Dawkins, I asked him in training camp, and I didn't even realize it when asking, he had never gone back-to-back years with the same left guard by his side. And barring some injury in the offseason, that's actually going to happen for the first time in Dawkins' career. We so often, as the seasons went along and maybe the offensive line struggled in previous years, it was this conversation of continuity almost where it became like a running joke of how often you're going to ask about continuity. But it matters in terms of communication and just the idea of, if you've never played offensive line, which I didn't, but just talking to enough guys that have, of
I didn't. I look like I did now, but I didn't.
But they often reference how critical it is to certainly communicate things and when it's loud and hostile environments, but also just knowing the player, knowing how they react and how they're going to hold up. I think the two additions on the interior at the guard spots were great. You get a Pro Bowl season from Deion Dawkins, who seems to be getting better as each year comes. Yeah. And now let's talk about Spencer Brown, because I think maybe a year ago the conversation was, at this point now, we might have to be talking about the Bills addressing right tackle because of the inconsistencies of Spencer Brown. He dealt with injuries. Going into last season, there was so much talk of, well, the back injury he suffered in the offseason really set him back in 2023 or 2022, and that's why he didn't look like the player that maybe he had his rookie season. Nice bounce back for him, and now the conversation in the offseason is, as he enters the final year of his deal, do the Bills consider an extension for Spencer Brown? What do you think?
I think so. I mean, I think his bounce back, and I mean, I remember multiple times throughout the season on hearing how Spencer Brown was just looking better and better each time. And you talk about continuity, John. I don't remember a time going into the offseason where there wasn't at least some questions on what was going to happen with the Bills' offensive line. And I think Spencer Brown has shown that he's part of this group. He needs to remain part of this group moving forward, and hopefully working together another season going in, it just gets better and better. And I think that he's earned it to get an extension.
And they would probably have to work it where it would be one of those extensions, but you still play your final year out the way that it is, because his cap hit is $1.5 million. And understanding the restrictions and constrictions that Brandon Beane's operating under this offseason, they can't really afford to lift that number up. There's probably roster bonuses and other ways to manipulate it to get him paid out the gate. But I agree with you. I think it would be beneficial under the model, again, that the Bills like to preach: draft, develop, re-sign. Then you'd have both tackles locked in. You'd have both guards locked in. And then really the only uncertainty after this season, or maybe even now, that could be the next talking point, would be Mitch Morse. Continuity on the offensive line is good, as we've already discussed. So I am in favor of a Spencer Brown extension this offseason.
Center is key, John, and Mitch Morse did say after the final game of the season that he plans to be back next season. At least we know that nothing's guaranteed at this point, but I think we know, and I think, I'm not saying they go to Josh Allen for everything, but I think Josh Allen's relationship with Mitch Morse and where they are right now, his leadership, this is a fit right now for him, I think. And I think it fits well for Mitch Morse and the team itself that he stays and we keep this unit together.
Thankfully, appear to once again avoid head injuries, something the year prior that kind of popped up that made us even a year ago heading into the last offseason have a conversation of what is the future of Mitch Morse. They ultimately keep him. He was taken aback that the first question asked of him at locker cleanout was what his future would be. He says he wasn't prepared for that. He says, I'm operating that I will be back here. He's going to be 32 years old. He carries a cap hit, though, $11.47 million. If the Bills just outright released him, $3 million dead cap, $8.47 of free cap space, of freeing it up. Now, again, let's go back to Michael Giannetti from Spot Track, who mapped out a way with multiple moves of how the Bills could clear some significant cap space to not only become compliant under it, but operate and make the moves that they want. In terms of Mitch Morse, he says, process a full salary plus $1 million roster bonus conversion that frees up $5.3 million in cap space. I think you got to do something with the contract, whether it's that. Michael's incredibly smart. This is his avenue, so I trust that. He also, just because we kind of glanced past Deion Dawkins because he's great, he's under contract, he also has a big cap hit. Maybe, according to Giannetti, they look to give him an extension because, again, he's getting better and better and better. He's still relatively young. I mean, Deion's 30, which is kind of crazy to me. He's been here this long, but 2017. So he's 30. Maybe you extend him a little bit. You want to know what's crazy? He's only 2 years younger than Mitch Morse. Deion Dawkins.
That is crazy.
Mitch with the beard and the bald head, he looks like...
It seems like Mitch Morse, maybe because of his time with the Chiefs, it just seemed like he's been around for a long time.
Right, and he's been good. So I think they need to do something with the contract, whatever that is. And I agree with you, because of the caliber he played at this year, I don't think it would be let's just simply outright release him
right,
and then find a new center, because whether or not you played the position, you played the game, you fully understand it. Just trust when seemingly everyone who has played the game, been on the offensive line, played quarterback or whatnot, they all without question, emphasize the importance of what the center can do.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think it would be as simple as, all right, cut Mitch Morse and slide Ryan Bates into there. I know that was a talking point a year ago. I don't think that would be prudent for this team to be at their best up front.
No, I don't either. And we talked about that as Ryan Bates is like a safety net, kind of someone who can play other spots on the line. But if Mitch Morse does have another head injury or something like that, there's someone there who's at least familiar with doing it. But again, this healthy line, just keep it together.
Right. And overall as a group, most of them are under contract. The only actual unrestricted free agent is David Edwards, who was their swing guy. He was the number 76 is eligible like all of the time down the stretch. Maybe Ryan Vandemark, a young player that they like. He can develop into that. We don't know what Tommy Doyle's going to be like coming off another major injury. Saw him progressing, but still walking with crutches, still having braces on and things like that, even at the end of the season. And that injury happened incredibly early. So from a swing tackle dynamic, Alec Anderson potentially could also be there. Vandemark and Anderson, two young guys that really didn't have to play. Vandemark came in notably in the Miami game when Dion cut his hand or finger,
right,
and did well. So I think those guys could be the internal developmental guys that assume those roles, especially if Doyle can't come back. On the interior, McGovern, Bates, Torrance, I mean, they're there. Bates makes over $5 million on the cap, but you really can't get out of it, and I think it is valuable to have a guy that can play all three spots there. And then Mitch Morse is your center with, again, Bates as your backup. You'll continue to flood. I don't think it would be a bad idea they'll bring in, sign some guys. They will maybe draft another tackle or another interior guy. Would you be in favor of, I don't want to say a high pick, what about third, fourth round to get ahead of things, knowing the Morse situation and age? Would you be interested in them getting ahead of things and maybe developing a guy, but he doesn't have to play, and then you slide him in year two?
So if you asked Kevin Carroll this question 5 years ago, I would have said, and I used to say this, a good team can just throw together an offensive line, whatever, and if your quarterback is that good, it's really irrelevant who's out there. I've come a long way since then, John, and I don't necessarily think that way anymore, and I think you should always start looking at getting younger as the team starts getting older itself, and I would think that would be the way to go. I wouldn't go first or second round, but maybe third round or day 3 like we talked about at other positions. You see someone there that you think you can develop, by all means, go after them and bring them in. Just because of with the offense, it still floors me that there was no big issue with the offensive line. It's incredible with what these guys have to deal with all the time.
Clearly the Bills have shown, even if there's not a direct path, they've drafted players. Dorian Williams is a prime example that there does not seem to be a clear path for him ever seeing the field anytime soon under his rookie contract. This, at least, if you invested a third or a fourth round pick, it would be the tea leaves that say, okay, this is the end for Mitch Morse after this, which I don't even think would necessarily have to be the case. I mean, maybe they let this season play out and see where things stand and go with that again. But you got to get younger. You got to get cheaper at positions, and center is one that I'm sure our friend Eric would also very highly have great input on the value of maybe being in the system without needing to play for a year and then assuming the role as the main communicator of a guy on the line full of guys that at that point would be at the minimum 3 years into their career.
Yeah. Eric Wood, I do not believe, was a center.
He wasn't. He was a guard.
League.
And that's what if you did a third or fourth round pick, yes, you would have Bates,
right?
But they could also be a swing interior guy as they develop in a pinch.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think when we get ready for training camp, I don't think offensive line might not make the list.
No,
this year.
the 10 10 storylines for Camp Countdown. Unless something unfortunate unfolds over the next few months, I don't think we're going to be discussing that in terms of keeping an eye on things, position battles, or anything. I think, again, just to put a bow on this, it's all about the money. Do they do something with Deion Dawkins' contract to free things up? And do they do something with Mitch Morse's contract to free some things up?
Yeah, so there we go. Offensive line good. Keep an eye out for other positions that we have out there. We've done quarterback, running back, receiver. Still to come out, the defensive backfield and linebackers for the Bills and what that situation is. And, oh, yeah, let's not forget about that defensive line because that's the big hitter.
It's the opposite
right
of what we just discussed. They don't have anyone under contract.
Right. So that's coming up around the corner. As always, everybody, thanks for joining us.